I think the key ingredient that made this film so successful is James Gunn, because he was the one that shepherded this cast of characters and this storyline from the beginning. And when you have someone who has a vision and an understanding of these characters very deeply, it just allows the audience to go on this journey and understand each step along the way, as opposed to when you have multiple filmmakers coming in, it gives you that sense of too many cooks in the kitchen. So with James Gunn having written and directed this one, he was able to just fully engross his point of view. And I think it was very obvious that he wanted to tell Rocket Raccoon's story in this one. And I think he did it in a very unique way, because it was simultaneously expected and unexpected, because he's always hinted at having a fucked up past, but the way it unfolded was like way more disturbing in the typical PG Marvel fashion. But it was, I thought it was very well done, and it pushed the borders of what I thought his story was. So it was eye-opening.
He's easily one of my favorites, like, from all the movies. And again, like, in terms of my relationship with the Guardians movies, the first Guardians is my favorite MCU movie. I watched it a disturbing number of times when it came out, and like, it's just so good. And I sat down watching this, and again, I kind of the same thing. I remember watching what was that? The latest Ant-Man movie, which was so bad.
Quantumania.
It was just fucking terrible. And I was sitting there like, fuck, I don't care about anything. It just ended, and I was like, fine, and I walked out. But when this started, I automatically felt more comfortable. And I think, as you said, with James Gunn being the key ingredient, his movies seem like they're the least interfered with. He's like the one who's been able to show his own voice the most. Like Ant-Man, I don't know who the director of that was, but clearly either he doesn't have much of a vision, or people are just fucking around with it, and it becomes sort of this jumbled mess of a movie. But I was very happy with this one.
I think one thing Guardians does really well is the humour. Like, it is...
And the music.
Music's great. I think they missed some opportunities with the soundtrack though. But like, as much as a sad origin story as this is, it is still hilarious. Not for the same reasons.
No, they do a good job at that balance.
Absolute laugh.
Well, I think the fact that the movie starts with Creep by Radiohead, so you just know that the movie's going to be sad. Like, it just sets the vibe.
And by the end of it, the song fits Rocket's sort of things.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, interesting choice to start, but it makes sense.
Yeah, I think the comedy was woven into the film at all the right times. You have moments of levity, which you can then smash with a home run with a good joke. And then you have these sort of more somber, like serious moments that then sort of rejig your mind and get you back into the feel-good factor, and then you continue to the next scene. And I understand some people don't like it. They want to sit with the serious and the seriousness of the moment. But I feel like when you go to a Marvel movie, you expect entertainment, and that's what James Gunn...
Go watch a different movie if that's what you want.
I think that it does stick with the seriousness pretty well.
It can...
It was like, as I said, I'm sure you all know, like, and everyone listening will know if you've seen the movie, but the scene where, like, Rocket's friends all die, and he just screamed, and that was when I cried. I was like, that's so cooked. It was such a raw thing. There was no music. He's just screaming, and then he starts, attacking that guy, and I thought that was just such a great scene. And again, also, it did not have a joke. It was just violent. It was like, oh my God.
He's just ripping his face off. Just in like just pure rage.
And they're showing up like close up, so you can tell what's happening. And then they pull his like face off at the end, and I was kind of like, "What?"
That was
How they wouldn't show that? Marvel.
Yeah, that's a good question actually.
Pushing the boundaries.
What's the age rating for?
It's an M movie.
Is M?
So mature audiences.
Yeah, right.
See, one of the things I think they did really well was sort of the theme of animal cruelty.
Well, this is something I wanted to talk about with you guys, because there's a lot of layered themes that I think are really interesting when you dissect them, because a lot of Marvel movies you can just look at as very surface level, that was a fun flick, but with this movie there was a lot of things that were quite intriguing, and the animal cruelty one was one of them.
Themes. Just because I walked into the cinema and knowing it was about Rocket's origin, but I did not expect to fully sort of come out of it changed in the sense of, like, some of the things that we do to animals, they're fucked up. And like it's
Well, yeah, because you look at them as like a lesser being.
Yeah, like particularly with the other creations that he's with, like Lila, I think Lila and others. It's just heartbreaking, and the fact is, it's true. Like this happens all the time.
But I think as well, like the fact that you gave them the same level of sentience, obviously not as intelligent, but they're conscious beings.
Yeah.
That takes the question further of like you are doing all this terrible stuff to these animals. I mean, it's kind of similar to what we're doing because if you look at it, a lot of the animals kind of are pretty highly conscious. Yeah. So it's kind of, I mean, taking it a step further to have us look back on our level and be like, wow, how the fuck are we doing this to these animals?
Similar things.
But the thing as well is, I feel like you have this message and no one's going to really change their lifestyle.
Yeah, but it doesn't...
At least it's something to think about.
It might not affect someone's daily life doesn't mean it doesn't force them to think about those sort of topics.
Which it absolutely did.
Because I think, that
It's
idea of
place, I guess.
the way humans treat animals, I think was a delicate balance that had to be like done really well. And I think James Gunn was able to maneuver really good. But I think what was most interesting, and I'm intrigued to hear you guys' thoughts about this, is that obviously the main villain of the film, his motivation is to create a perfect society.
Eugenics.
Yeah, but not so much eugenics. That was a key ingredient, but it was more so about like creating a culture of people that thought all the same way. And if we cast our minds back, and Nick touched on this about the controversy with James Gunn, and James Gunn was originally removed from this film because a bunch of people dug up a tweet from about a decade ago, and in relation to it was a questionable joke, but a joke nonetheless about pedophilia, and James Gunn got cancelled for that. He got removed from the film. And I think when he was then got brought back onto the project and was doing his rewrites, I think one of the themes that he very subtly brought into this film was the idea of our desire to make society perfect consequently breeds problems within society. And the example I use is like social justice warriors, because they go out into the world and being like, that's an injustice, that's a terrible thing, racism, sexism, whatever. And then they go about trying to fix it. But by fixing it, they marginalize people who don't agree with them and try and shut down their point of view and aren't willing to engage in a debate. And I think the villain of this film kind of encapsulated a lot of those ideas, because when Rocket was smarter than him and voiced an opinion, he wanted to shut that down and understand, why are you better than me? And also, when he was creating a perfect society, I think it was on Earth 2 or whatever silly name they called it, when there was all those degenerates and criminals and the alien equivalent of drug dealers and stuff, he's just like, well, we'll start again, and basically just casting them aside. And that mentality of just, if we do not value someone because they're not on the same page as me, we just get rid of them. And I thought that was so subtle but so prominent in the way that James Gunn incorporated it.
Like he's kind of critiquing as well, because like when Rocket provides his opinion, it is showing how without other people's viewpoints, we can't actually reach those higher points where we want to reach. He wasn't able to solve the problem without Rocket coming in from a different point of view.
Exactly.
And it shows, like this modern movement where we're kind of almost regressing to a point where it's no one's allowed to speak unless it's like this hive mind.
When you're in an echo chamber, all you hear are ideas that reinforce your own beliefs.
And that doesn't push you to think something better. Like you could have a belief that maybe is correct, but there's some flaws within it, which the only way to get past those flaws is by hearing where the flaws are. So it's like, to live in this world where everything is the same and we're all perfect kind of doesn't really end up being perfect.
That point is actually so fantastic.
Yeah, I didn't think about that.
I didn't think about it in that way. And I was actually going to say, one of my criticisms of the film was I didn't like the villain at all.
Oh, okay.
I thought he didn't act very well.
He's a bit over,
And I will say as well, he screamed all of his lines, and I was like, I'm not buying into you as a villain. You aren't intimidating me in any way. I found him quite pathetic.
Yeah.
But upon you saying that, I feel like that's exactly what the point was.
Yeah, that's what I was saying to Caleb. That it was intentional.
Person just shouts down people who perhaps are giving that opposite opinion or whatever, And he actually is a fucking idiot. But he's just screaming like, I'm the best type thing. And I think that actually, now that you've made that point to me, I feel like that whole decision by Gunn, which I was going to say is a criticism, I thought it was kind of weakly written, you know, because I didn't have a lot of depth. But I think there was, it lacked depth.
It's very subtle. And that was one of the things I noticed as well, because I thought the exact same thing as you. I thought there's a lot of overacting here.
Yeah.
But then towards the end, when I started to sort of piece that idea together and understand where James Gunn was coming from, I realized, oh, okay, he's a caricature for that portion in the real world society. And yeah, I thought it was very, very well done. But in saying that though, yes, he's overacting, but I think it's deliberately so. And that comes down to the directing, not necessarily the actor.
Yeah.
And I guess you can sort of build on your point. You know, in the main pyramid sort of building on Earth too, when they get to that final confrontation and he sort of gets outdone by Star-Lord and who else was it? Was it Groot?
Groot, yeah.
He sort of cowers straight away. I mean, you can sort of reflect that with the social justice warrior. As soon as there is that immediate challenge, they sort of become a recluse. Which works well with your point.
And he says the problem with Earth, in his opinion, was like the problems with sort of, I think he said, I forget the exact word he used, but the problems with sort of capitalism and also bigotry. They were his two things. And I was like, now I'm thinking about if he's sort of some sort of representation for these SJW extremists online. Him saying that is literally what they are advocating for, that the problems with Earth are. I think that's just so interesting. That's such a great, and then think about that.
The next thing I want to talk about is, this is an opinion that I don't think gets voiced enough from MCU fans, but I want to talk about Nebula. And I think she has had one of the most underrated story arcs in the MCU. If we remember where she was in one of your favorite MCU films, in the first one, she was the villain, the second in command to Ronan, and she was this very brooding, very harsh, very to herself villain that had a very stern and desire to be better than her sister, Gamora. And to see her then come into the second movie where she's not quite sure who she is anymore and is trying to figure out what her goal and what her mission is in life, and then to see that evolve again in both Infinity War and Endgame, and then obviously when Gamora dies in Infinity War, to then see Gamora become a certified good guy, join the Avengers, then join the Guardians of the Galaxy, and then to see her again in this third installment. And again, just sort of seeing her as a character that is willing to now sacrifice herself for the greater good, and also is willing to accept the people around her as family. Whereas before she was so to herself and was unwilling to accept people into her life, especially her sister. And I just think her character arc across this franchise has been so underrated and not very well appreciated by a lot of fans, and I very much so enjoyed it. I understand a lot of the criticisms that people throw towards Nebula. It's a lot of shouting and screaming and overacting, but again, that's, I think, her character. You either like it or you don't. But in terms of storytelling, from where she was to where she ended up to being a certified hero within the Guardians of the Galaxy team, I really enjoyed that, and I wanted to give credit to Karen Gillan for pulling it off.